Meanwhile, back on the podcast, four colossal nerds named Saba, Chris, Kristina, and Frank have set out to take on a great darkness that has enveloped the world of fandom with their powers of common sense and the strength to take on even the most butthurt Twitter mobs and insufferable comment section trolls. They fight for truth, objectivity, and nuance in the conversation and debate over fictional made-up shit.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Meanwhile, back on the podcast. I'm Frank McGuire.
I'm Kristina Dudema.
I'm Chris Sabana.
And Saba Mir will not be joining us for this episode. We miss you, Saba. We hope to have you back as soon as possible. Nonetheless, we got a great episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking about animation. We just saw Clone Wars Season 7 this past year. It was fantastic. DC concluded their animated universe with Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. And we just got the announcement that Into the Spider-Verse 2 is moving into production. So there's lots of things going on in the animated space that we want to talk about. And animation in general, the medium of animation, and kind of where it sits in fandom right now, and what the past has looked like, and what the future may look like, and even what the present may look like. So let's get into this, guys. The first thing I wanted to talk about, because honestly, I think this is the thing that really perplexes me the most. The stigma of animation just being for kids. It's kind of infuriating because anime is such a large part of the Venn diagram of fandom, and it's highly respected, right? You know, you hear a lot of people, even who aren't even into fandom, that are into anime, but they're not into comic books, and they're not into superhero films, and they're not into Star Wars or Star Trek, but they like anime. But if you tried to get them to sit down and watch, you know, an episode of Clone Wars, they'd be like, oh, it's a fucking cartoon. I don't want to watch that. So, guys, what's with this fucking stigma? Seriously.
I mean, I guess it depends on the type of people you chill with. I mean, there's stigma with anime too. Like, probably not the same people that would look down on animated movies. But I do agree that, like, animated movies are on a lower league than they should be, and animation movies like Pixar and DreamWorks operate in this like higher echelon, where I think like animated movies, not animation, wow, this is gonna get confusing, isn't it, should be in playing in a higher league than it is, because they make fantastic movies. I've said this before in this podcast, like, I love the DC, especially the DC like animated roster. Like they make amazing stories, and like, I don't see, I mean, there is a reason why I think like animation operates in where they operate. It's because, like, you know, it takes more technology and more work and more like artistic, I guess, effort to showcase an animation than it is for an animated like a drawn cartoon. But I think in terms of storytelling, they're on par with each other. Like a lot of people say animation can induce more emotion than the animated world. That's not true. Like that's like, if you've ever watched Flashpoint Paradox, like, that shit is tearjerkers. I mean, I didn't cry because I'm not really capable of that, but like you can find a lot of emotion in animated movies, and I think I do agree that like that they should be more praised than they are, or more, or like kind of playing in a higher league than they are right now.
Interesting. But Chris, can we go back to the specific question? Because I just
stigma?
Yeah, what's your take, dude? Like, what is your impression of why the stigma exists around animation? Like Western animation, more or less. Like, you know, the Western world's animation is kind of seen as kids play. You know, it's you know, well, it's the kiddie table of filmmaking. Like, why?
You know, because it came from Saturday morning cartoons, right? Like it like that's kind of the inception of it. It's like anime may be this like big thing, but that's because it comes from a culture where it's celebrated by adults. But here it's like it's a thing that is spawned from Teletoon and YTV if you're in Canada, and like it comes from this thing where it's like it's free on Saturday morning cartoons, and kids would go watch it, and then now it's only very recently that it's kind of graduated into the adult spectrum, whereas Pixar is this like huge projects that they made that were marketed for for children because that's their embedded audience, but they also know that parents would go out and watch it with the kids, so they started putting things in the movies for the parents, and then eventually the parents also got into them, so they became the audience as well. Whereas like the animated world hasn't really passed that crucible yet, in my opinion. Like it's kind of just passing the threshold of this, because like Pixar and DreamWorks did the same thing, right? Like they also had to pass that test of, oh yes, this could be for adults, right? But they did this with success after success, with Toy Story, with Shrek, with How to Train Your Dragon, which is the best goddamn animated movie ever. So they did this with success after success. Animated movies hasn't really got, like, it isn't really there. In my opinion, it's just a matter of time. It's kind of just like they're late to the game, that they're kind of following in like these animated movies footsteps. But they also have the added disadvantage of not being impressive in a technical sense, because Pixar and stuff, like, they're always introducing new technology for like The Good Dinosaur, for example, like, which was a horrible movie. We can argue that later if you want, but that was a horrible movie. But its claim to fame was it invented a whole bunch of technology to make it like hyper realistic and whatever else. Mm-hmm. And so like that's a one up that these animation movies have, because they can always show off like new technology and new ways to innovate animation. Whereas cartoons, like it's a step below. It's essentially like animating like the comic book pages, which is like you can only do that a certain number of ways. You can't really innovate in that realm, in that technical realm, right? So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my opinion on it.
Kristina, what do you think? Like, well, you know what? We'll come back to Chris. I got something else I want to ask Chris. But Kristina, what do you think? Like, why is there this stigma? Like, why can I go into, let's say I'm going into work the next morning and they're like, hey, Frank, what'd you do over the weekend? You know, oh, I watched season 3 of Clone Wars all the way through. Like, why would and you know, the typical response you get is, isn't that just a cartoon?
Because you're working with jerks, Frank.
No. But Chris, this is a more general thing. Like, this is very present in our society.
Yeah, it's true.
But if I went to the office and I was like, hey, I just watched Akira, it was fucking awesome, and they'd be like, oh yeah, dude, Akira's great. Like, I love Akira. Like, for some reason, people will embrace anime and people will embrace Pixar and DreamWorks in a very different way than they will Western animation. Kristina, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think part of that is because most of Western animation is geared towards children. I can't really think of any 2D animated rated R movies or even 3D animated ones. I can't think of
Heavy Metal.
Okay, like that are not anime. That are not anime.
That movie was crazy.
Because I feel like anime is different. Anime was always anime always had an adult audience because they would be violent. They would do violent things in animated movies, and they would discuss like politics and war and you know, crazy topics that like they don't really touch on in most animated movies.
Yes, most, but we're starting to see more of that, right? Aren't we? Like, I'd say Superman Red Sun is a great example of something where the themes are very, very mature. Like, definitely. I would say, right?
Yeah, so I'd say DC is definitely stepping out there. I actually Googled like what the top 25 animated films are on IMDb. And it was mostly 3D movies. The top grossing ones were mostly 3D movies, except for The Lion King. So for some reason, like The Lion King, in terms of 2D animation, had like more appeal than most of the other kind of movies. But yeah, I guess between comic book type cartoons being on TV for kids and like Disney being so successful and mostly targeting kids, I think that's where the stigma kind of comes from around that. But I do think it's changing, and I do think there's less stigma around 3D animation for some reason. That feels like a little bit more acceptable for adults to go see. And I do think that is because 3D animation is new. It doesn't have like those nostalgic or, you know, old school ideas around it,
Right.
and it's a newer thing, and also I think they do target more adult audiences. They kind of make it for the family, like not just for the kids, but also for the parents.
Sure. Do you think that the stigma is justified, though? Do you think that, or do you think it's more of a question of the people who still hold this stigma in their consciousness? They haven't been exposed to recent animated content that kind of counter that stigma.
Well, personally, I don't get why anyone would judge anyone for a personal interest that's
It happens,
not
dude.
hurting anyone.
I
That's
know.
kind of silly. So
I know.
I don't get it. I don't get why the stigma's there. But I guess it's like a cool factor thing, but things that are cool change with time. So, and I think we are seeing that with regular comic book movies, like live action ones. So they've become mainstream. They used to be a thing for like super nerdy people.
Well, that's the thing, being cool is a paradox because, being cool is about being an individual, is about, kind of being the rebel or being the outlier, doing your own thing. But our sense of cool, or the general societal sense of cool, is following fucking trends and looking like everybody and their grandmother as far as your fashion sense goes. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the grocery store and I can see like 5 girls standing in the same area that don't know each other, all wearing jean jackets and yoga pants and white Converse. Like it's almost like they give them a uniform when they move into Liberty Village. I don't know what it is, but like it's ridiculous. Like, sorry, I'm just ranting about the paradoxical nature of being cool, but it is kind of this thing where everybody's kind of up on their high horse about how hip they are when they're not hip at all, because all they do is follow trends that somebody else set. They haven't set one of their own ever, so it's kind of shitty. It's kind of shitty that stigma exists. Do you guys think it's ever going to go away? Like, do you think?
Hell yeah. Are you kidding me? The emergence of superhero culture is gonna change that. Like, and I know a lot of people who never even heard of like the lesser known heroes are getting into them now because of this and this sudden surge of popularity when it comes to comic book as a source material. And I think because namely DC are making more serious attempts at feature length actual artistic movies, they're gonna it's just a matter of time. I just really think they haven't passed the crucible that all of these other modes of animation have already passed. I think that's gonna go away. And I don't know, man. I feel like the stigma. Yes, there are some there's more probably with cartoons than there are with Pixar movies, but there is stigma against that too. It just depends on who. It just depends on the group that you're interacting with. Like, there's a lot of people who hate on anime, right? Like, it's especially people who don't have exposure to it. I guess that's kind of the whole point of this whole thing, is that people who aren't exposed to this medium would always kind of have that stigma. But don't discount that anime has its own stigma, because there's a lot of them.
Is that your covert way of calling me out, Chris? Is that what that was?
Do you have a stigma against anime?
You know how I feel about anime. It's my issue with it is that the characters, the aesthetic of the characters are just overly feminized. I don't know why I have an issue with it. It just doesn't look right to me.
Depends what you're watching.
I don't think I don't think that's in every anime. I don't think you've watched enough to.
Well, anytime I've ever seen them trying to adapt a Marvel property, they've got long eyelashes.
That's just comparative. That's just comparative to what they actually are. Because I know exactly what you're thinking about, which is the Wolverine.
One
anime.
Yeah, that one, and the new one that was on the Disney Channel just recently, the Avengers one, where apparently they have 2 kid sidekicks now, and Captain America has long eyelashes, and it just doesn't look. It doesn't.
Are these animes for kids though? Who's the audience for these animes?
I don't know. I haven't sat down and watched the story, so I couldn't really tell you. Right?
In Akira, I don't think that the male characters are feminized at all. They definitely feel super.
No, I'd say that
same thing in Studio Ghibli films. The males seem
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think that Akira, no, it doesn't feel very feminized at all. If anything, I think some of the lead characters in that are, they're a little chubby. They got like some of them are carrying a little weight, so that's a little different than the normal anime aesthetic. So that's kind of cool.
But yeah, and I think anime is also a lot more progressive. It's like not afraid to explore like things like androgynous characters and bisexuality.
That's
and
for sure.
All the LGBTQ plus stuff. So,
that's for sure. But that's like, Japanese culture has largely been ambiguous with its theater. Like kabuki theater, men would play women all the time, right? So I can see the translation there.
That used to happen in like English theater as well, and like I'm sure North
William
American
Shakespeare had
theater.
women had men play women. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, it was more of a societal hierarchical kind of thing at that point, though. Women were obviously not in the places that they are now. So I want to touch back on one thing that Chris said. He was talking about kids. Now, I think that's interesting because I think that's maybe where the stigma comes from. As we're growing up and, we're having kids, and especially now because I think kids and parents are more in line with each other than they ever have been, right? I think that this generation society is more in line where, we kind of speak the same, we're using the same words, we're all using emojis. Like I just think that the demarcation line between kids and parents isn't, or the division between kids and parents, it just isn't as large as it used to be. Like I can remember with my parents, like I didn't listen to their music. I didn't talk like them. I didn't enjoy the movies that they enjoyed, except for like comedies, but like now, I look at my sister with her kids and she enjoys all the same stuff that she does, to a degree. Obviously, she's still a little young, but if I look at my friends with older kids, they're closer in personality than you would expect. So maybe this stigma has something to do with the fact that the kids are spending much more time in front of screens. So they're therefore being seen watching way more cartoons or way more animated content than normal. And obviously the cartoons, animation is the medium in which kids are kind of, being entertained and educated and communicated to much more frequently. Yeah. Do you guys think it has something to do with that?
Yeah, I guess when you touch on intergenerational aspect there's a lot to that. Like everything our grandparents' generation went through, they had like so much serious shit going on in their lives, like the depression and
wars all the time.
And like, I don't think they were more they cared more about the news than anything else, I think. So yeah, I think like in terms of that, like that generation was devoting their time and energy to other things and probably just trying to work and make ends meet. Same thing with our parents' generation. Like I think that generation was more into materialism and like working lots of hours to have like the biggest house possible and whatever, all that. And yeah, I think our generation has just stepped back from that. And also it's a generation of people who grew up on video games and all that, and maybe didn't feel as much pressure to grow up quickly.
Good point.
There wasn't expectations to be married by the time you're like 25.
That is so true.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that the intergenerational thing plays a large part, but I also think that at a certain age, we're expected to kind of evolve beyond cartoons and comic books too. There's this expectation, right? And I think that kind of has something to do with it as well.
I think the more generations go on, that goes away, I think.
Yeah. It becomes less. The pressure becomes less for sure. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I don't think our kids are expected to do that. I think like maybe even just the generation after us, like I don't think they're I think it's being normalized a lot more now. I think like our generation is probably the last that's even going to be expected to sort of graduate from, if you want to use that word, like graduate from animation, because the more good things come from that industry, the less it'll be marketed for kids, right? Because like if you think about the movies that have won Academy Awards for animation, they're more mature than And even more so, like when they win awards, then the next few movies that come out in that world get even more and more serious, right? Because like success breeds like more success and more opportunities for companies to or studios to take interest in that sort of stuff. It just takes a few groundbreaking movies, and I think we're well on our way. Like I can name a few animated movies that I think could pave the way for.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like right now I keep going back to Flashpoint Paradox, where it's like that's the, or even okay, so even Gods and Monsters, which is one of my favorite DC animated movies, like that was definitely not for kids. And like 20 years ago that movie would have never been made, because it's like what's your audience? Like you have no audience, right? This is your proof that movies it's moving in this direction, the direction that we want. If it was for kids, Gods and Monsters would have never been made. That movie's dark as shit, right? And even back in the day, I guess there were, like you said before, heavy metal that was marketed only for adults. Like if you've ever seen heavy metal, that is not for kids.
No,
but like that is kind of like the one of like movies like that weren't ubiquitous. But it goes to show that there is this audience for it, and I think like it's just slowly moving in this direction. I just think it's the latest of the animated worlds that have kind of tried their hand in creating like serious works, and I just think it just takes some time, you know.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen the transition for like comedy TV shows. We've seen a lot of adult comedy shows.
Good point.
Happen.
Good point.
And there doesn't seem to be a stigma around that. Like Archer.
Yeah,
was
Netflix
super
seems to be embracing it with like.
Archer's dope. I like Archer.
Yeah, Archer. F is for family.
They were tapping into an audience that grew up on The Simpsons and Family Guy.
True.
They were hoping that all those people
true.
would jump into an adult cartoon.
Yes.
Yeah, like The Simpsons is very responsible.
Very true
for this, because they took us, like they were there for the entire transition, because the earlier Simpsons were very like family values and like Saturday morning-ish cartoons, and then they also evolved as the audience evolved. So yeah, if you wanted to see a chronicle of the evolution of animation, just look from season 1 of The Simpsons to season 2 billion or whatever they are on right now.
Yeah, but it was a satire too, right? Like it was a satire of American life, you know, middle income family, right? Like that's what that satire, you know, that's what they were satirizing, was like the middle income family, and you know, and it was definitely better in the earlier years, that's for sure. And it kind of lost its steam. But then we saw things like South Park jump up, you know, and I think South Park is a great example of how content overcame the quality of the actual aesthetic of the medium. You know, like South Park looks like shit. It does not look good at all. But it's fucking hilarious.
The point, though. It's supposed to look like a dopey kid drew it. Like,
yeah, I think that's what they're going for. Yeah, I think that's what they're going for. But you know, meanwhile, back on the podcast is about fandom. So let's try and stick to the fandom stuff. But if we have good examples that fall out of that realm, I'd like to talk about them. And I think South Park, Simpsons, Family Guy. You know, Netflix is already embracing animation wholeheartedly with that show that they're doing with Bill Burr, the comedian. F is for Family. I don't know if you guys have watched that.
A funny show. Yeah.
It's fucking hilarious. It's fucking hilarious.
There's so many adult cartoons now. Yeah. And then I guess they tried to take it in that direction with Harley Quinn. So I guess DC has never been afraid to do this.
Yes. DC. Okay, let's talk about DC. Okay, because I think DC is a prime example of the potential of animated product. Like, look what they've done with their film universe. I think if you surveyed a large part of the fan base of comic book film adaptations and you asked them about the DC animated film universe, I think that they like most of the DC animated film catalog. There's not a lot of disappointments in that catalog at all. Most of them are actually pretty good. I'd rank them like 7 and up or like 6.5 and up. But yeah, I'd say most of my favorites are like 8, 9, you know, like around there. You know, I really like Justice League, Flashpoint Paradox. I love that movie. I love Justice League War. I love Superman versus the Elite. I think that's amazing
Is that your
story.
top 3?
No, I don't think it's
What
my
is your
top
top
3. Dude, I don't know if I could do it. Like, I really
Oh, yeah.
don't. Like, one of the hardest things with me is trying to limit what I love about something. You know, like I like so much stuff. You know, I think the only definitive list I could give you at this point would be my favorite Star Wars movies. That's it. Like, in order. Like, I know exactly what my favorite Star Wars movies are in order. But
Right.
with DC animated film, there's so many like little nuanced things in each of them that I like, and there's so many differences that I like, and they're excellent films. And honestly, they should get more theatrical releases. Like, I think if they did the marketing and they promoted these films better, and not just through their existing channels, because let's face it, the DC comic book reader doesn't need any incentive to go see these films. He wants to go see them because he loves the characters, right? He's going to go see them no matter what, most likely, right? But if you want to build a new audience for these things, you got to market them properly, and you got to get them in the theaters. I think it's a shame that the only place that there's a theatrical release for a DC animated film is typically in California. I would love to have like a DC animated film released in Canada. I think that would be fucking awesome. I'd go. I'd totally go.
I think the target market for these movies is the comic book fan base, and they don't really have to spend a lot of money on marketing dollars to get those people to go see that movie. And they're going to try to spend a lot of money on marketing to target a broader audience, I don't think it's going to get the payoff that they're going to want from it. So I think or it's more of a risk. So I think that's why they don't necessarily do that.
There's a big problem with, and I mean, I'm saying that it's a problem because I do want it to be what you said, like the world that you said, where they would make theatrical releases. But the reason why it doesn't work is because this is the same reason why Grant Gustin and who's the guy that played Daredevil, I like him too. That's the reason why it's hard for them to make it into the silver screen, is because it's really hard to justify to a studio to release something for people to go and pay for when they can get it for free. I mean, Netflix is not for free, but like that's the problem with these cartoons, is that like we've set a status quo on them, which is they're readily available. You see them in the Justice League, you see like the Justice League show, and then like a lot of these are like for free online. So it's like, so for you to say that we're gonna release it in theaters, you would have to also sell something new, right? Like you have to sell something new, because then it just seems like you're taking something that we all get for free readily, and you're making us pay for it, right? Which is a crime. Like I definitely agree that like they should do theatrical releases, because I would definitely go for it. Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, can you explain your point about getting it for free though? Because like you either have to buy it on Blu-ray or you have to download it.
Right, but like the online culture is like the internet culture is pretty much like you're getting the like you definitely pay for Netflix and stuff, but when you already have Netflix and this stuff usually gets released on Netflix, now I have to go out and go watch Grant Gustin do The Flash in the silver screen, even though I usually just get it, right?
Gotcha.
And it's like, and it's not right. Like I don't think that it's like everything is in place where it should be, but that's the reason why like it's hard to make this jump, just because we wanted to make this jump. Like they would have to justify to us, not like me specifically, but to us, like as the audience, why this suddenly is a new level where we have to go see it, where we should see it in theaters. It should stand enough because they're good enough to actually be released in theaters. It's just the realm that they operate in is just this lower realm of like semi-free media, right? That's what's hard for them to make the leap.
And I think there's another thing that's going to be hard to make these movies appeal to a mainstream audience. It's because they're so much targeted to a comic book audience. They skip a lot of the introductory stuff. You don't really get like introduced to the characters in these movies. It's kind of like you kind of just know who they are, and they'll bring in like obscure characters, but most of the people who are watching these kind of just know who those characters are, so they don't have to do a lot of hand holding for the audience in terms of like building
and that's a shame because
in that way.
So, sorry, Kristina, I cut you off. Do you want to finish? Actually,
yeah. So my point is basically that in order to bring these movies to a mainstream audience, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to like create movies that will introduce the characters that are not known to that
Interesting.
mainstream audience.
Which would directly kind of work against the charm of it, right? Because for me, I've often found that the DC, I've said this before in this podcast, and I know it's not an easy thing to do, but like the DC animated universe has its charm because it can jump from property to property. Like they do Gods and Monsters, which has nothing to do with Batman Bad Blood, and which in turn has nothing to do with Batman
Year One,
under the Red Hood, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do like whatever, and then it takes a little bit more legwork to kind of research which universe is which. But that's kind of the fun of it, right? Like it's like they can make these standalone things and not have to worry about consequences kind of going through these things. That they can kill off Batman in one movie and then he's alive again, no one questions it. And it directly works against it if you stop that. Like if you make it more digestible, because then you're limiting the possibilities of these different universes, and you're kind of stopping one of the best things about the DC animated movies, right? Like the fact that they can jump from place to place and universe to universe and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. However, though, you guys are talking about the telling of origin stories, or giving people backstory about these characters. There has been a couple of origin stories within the animated universe. The Shazam versus Black Adam, that had Shazam's origin story. Wonder Woman animated film had Wonder Woman's origin story.
Well, no, but the point is that like Kristina is saying that like they would have to do it even though that's not what they intended to do. But those movies were intended to give you like they set off to make a movie based off of the origin story, right? Whereas if they mainstreamed it, they would have to do it out of necessity, not because it's the thing that they targeted.
Yeah, I feel like they listened to the fanboys and fangirls and were like, okay, you guys hate all these things about origin stories, fine. We'll like give you something that's not an origin story, but it's not going to be on the big screen. You're going to go pay for it on your streaming service or whatever. So.
Well, I think that's a shame. And let me tell you why I think it's a shame. Comic books translate into animation so much quicker and so much better with a less laborious methodology. Right. I think we can all agree on that, right? Like if you wanted to turn a comic book into an animated series or an animated film, you could literally hire the same art team, which Todd McFarlane did with Spawn. He brought Spawn to HBO. He drew it, right? You could literally do that and have the exact same creative team, the exact same vision be consistent throughout the entire process. I think that's kind of sexy. I think that's something that is of high value. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I've often said it like before. I completely agree with you, Frank. Like it also brings a certain level of respect for source material that you don't get anywhere else.
100%, because the writers and the artists are working on the thing all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like their work. Yeah, it's more true to life than anything else. And it's like with movies, no matter how close you get to the source material, it'll always be an adaptation, right? Like an adaptation. Sorry, wow. Like it can never be 1-for-1 the comics because it's just completely different mediums, right? It's a 2-hour movie, and like so it's just not the same. Completely agree.
It was fucking
show.
Yeah, it's a show. It's HBO show.
It's weird because it's a movie too. Like I have the DVD set.
Oh,
of it,
really? Okay.
And it kind of plays like two movies. Yeah. But it also plays like a show. Like it's kind of subdivided. It's really cool.
I love that they hired Keith David. Oh my God. Keith David is one of the best voice actors. I love that guy. He's so good. Before we get in any specific examples of actual fandom animation, I want to pose another question here. So there's been a call within the fandom commentary community for quite a while. Christian Harloff from Jedi Council is a big fan of this idea. He wants to see IP be adapted into more long form storytelling, so series based over film based. So he feels that these kinds of stories can be told a lot more thoroughly and a lot more comprehensively through a long form medium, right? Films kind of limit you. They kind of box you in, right? We saw that happen to Zack Snyder, right? Like when you've got the studio coming to you saying, hey guy, you need to cut this into 2 hours. and you haven't already, if you have a cut that's already 2 hours and 45 minutes, you're going to lose some of the fucking magic. We saw that with the Batman v Superman movie. Well, in my opinion, I know you guys don't feel the same way, but like, what do you think about the idea of kind of moving away from the silver screen and getting more long form storytelling for your favorite characters and your favorite franchises and your favorite IP? What do you think?
Hell yeah. I've often, like, especially lately, like, I feel like it's the superior way of telling a story. Like, and it's a crime that it's only recently that you're kind of seeing this. But yeah, man, like, I think this kind of like owes a success to like the big heavy hitters like Walking Dead and
yes,
and Game of Thrones and stuff. But they're big. They're like 7-10 hour long movies, and hell yeah, I think that's where our culture is naturally progressing to, and count me in.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's our next.
And movies will have their place too. Like I don't actually think that it'll quote unquote like replace movies, because they have their own thing. Like you said, the movie world kind of limits their thing. That's kind of like the point of it too, right? Like it's kind of like challenging to a storyteller to have these limitations, and that's why movies will always exist. But yes, I agree with all of these like stories that have rich source material and they just want to tell a good story. The confines of the silver screen definitely is not their place. Like they need to like their doors need to open, and they need to be free and roam around, because that's what's so good about them, right? Like you can go anywhere with them in any direction.
Yep. And
I completely agree.
And do you want me to give you a perfect example of where a long form story would have done wonders for this particular IP? X-Men Dark Phoenix. Like if they had told the entire fucking story, yes. If they had told the entire Dark Phoenix story, that thing would have exceeded Endgame potentially. Like, because that is a great fucking story, and they did it in the animated series, and it was amazing. Everybody loves that part of the animated series, right? Sorry, Kristina, I'd love to get your take on this on this question too.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I was going to say. So we did see that. We've seen superhero movies be really successful in the long form, TV show format. I guess it wasn't a long form TV show, but it was on every day. There was a lot of episodes of it. They had a lot of time to fill. So yeah, we saw them tell some really great stories there that maybe didn't lend themselves as well to the big screen. And, it's still something that everyone still loves. Everybody still wants to go and stream that X-Men cartoon. So I guess in terms of long form TV, we're starting to see Marvel kind of move into that with their Disney Plus shows. Sorry, it's not animated, but they're going to be doing a bunch of their shows in live action on the long format. Mm-hmm. I think they had some success with the shows that were previously on Netflix. So Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, when those shows first came out, there was a lot of hype about them and lots of people went to go watch them. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And, I think you bring up some good examples, especially with the new Marvel Disney Plus series that are going to be produced, right? We're obviously going to get a lot more story that couldn't be crammed into a 2-hour movie from that. But also, I want to do a side-by-side comparison with something that I think is an interesting side-by-side at this point. But the Harley Quinn character just recently had her Birds of Prey movie. Didn't do that well. It wasn't critically acclaimed. A lot of people kind of feel like it fell flat. But if you talk to people about the Harley Quinn animated series on DC Universe and Adult Swim, they love it, right? So maybe there are just characters that are too complex to tell a decent story within the confines of the silver screen. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
I don't know if Birds of Prey is the best example of that, because I feel like if it was marketed as a Harley Quinn movie, then it would have done better probably. Like I feel like part of the problem with that was how they marketed it and how they tried to bring in all the Birds of Prey characters in it, and it didn't really work. Like that's the aspect that didn't really work.
I agree with your general premise, Frank, but I don't think that example kind of fits it. The problem with Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn and Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, two different titles. But the problem with that is not that the character was more suited for the long form like TV. The problem with that thing was that movie sucked, right? Like it had
it was horrible.
with the character. Like that movie was just bad because it was bad. But I do agree that like some characters lends itself more to long form and more works of art as well. Like like we said with X-Men, it's like X-Men is an ensemble like sort of team up story, and that's just generally better in TV in a show format because it's just you can take like and also like a lot of fantasy books and sci-fi books they're way better in TV because like the way books work is like they do chapters, but there's also like mini climaxes in between, which can be like very beautifully split into like seasons or episodes or whatever. I definitely agree that like some characters fit better in long form, and most stories fit better in long form, just based on complexity, direction of development.
Cool.
Because like I don't know, like for me, movies have always have often like been I've often thought that movies kind of have a thesis that they have to prove, that they have to like sell to the audience always. There's very like it's very pointed towards one point, whereas shows go the opposite way. It's like it's more exploration. Like I can go this direction and then explore this direction with another character.
More character development. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
just like they're not proving one thing like over anything else. They're proving many different things to the audience and like developing characters in this like kind of this outbranching instead of going inward towards one sort of idea that movies have to kind of fulfill within a 2 hour or whatever runtime. So characters that kind of fit into that mold obviously is better for I don't know if that made any sense. I'm speaking a lot of metaphors, I think.
No, yeah, that totally made sense. I get that.
Yeah, so I guess you could say the long form has the potential to be a much more richer experience, right? So maybe that's something that these companies need to take a longer look at. And I think with the advent of these streaming services becoming more ubiquitous in people's lives, it you know, the synergy and the timing is kind of too good to be true, you know? So I think we'll see an advancement over time into more long form storytelling. And that'll take us naturally kind of into the next thing I want to talk about. So from the way I see it, there are a lot of there's a lot of IP that's producing better content through animation than they are in live action.
Yeah, like you're talking about DC.
I want to talk about DC first, okay? I want to talk about DC first, okay?
I'll agree with that for DC.
Yeah,
okay.
Like, yeah, it depends on the IP.
I've got a couple of examples, and it's not just DC. There's a few examples there. So DC, for some reason, I don't know whether it's because Jeff Johns really loves working on the animated stuff and, you know, kind of pushes his responsibilities in the live action world to the side. I don't know what the fuck it is. But for some reason, if you look down, you know, the roster of live action DC films and the roster of DC animated films, there are way more wins in the animated column. Why is that? And the funny thing is, you can't argue the tone, because the DC animated films are just as dark or even darker than the live stuff. So there's no real like you can't draw a demarcation line other than, I think, and this is my opinion, and Chris, I want to hear yours too. It's just the translation from the comic book medium into the animated medium has been way more accurate, has been way more in service of the fans. And it's also been a lot more complex and just better writing overall.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like if you remember, the biggest problems of the DC movies is failure of adaptation, right? Like
except for Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder is a weird example, because it's like he adapted it tonally, at least, as much as he could, even though like it was kind of like Snydered up. He's got his own flavor of thing, but that's the problem, is that like he adapted it in this weird halfway where he adapted it tonally, but he couldn't adapt like a lot of its core I don't want to say values, but like a lot of these characters have their sort of their character traits. Like if you look at DC's kind of failures and successes, it usually just boils down to failures in adaptation, right? Or successes in adaptations. A success in adaptation, for example, is the Dark Knight series. Like that was for sure an adaptation. They weren't trying to get it super close to the comics. Like they were taking the themes of Batman, they were taking like the moral quandaries and all that, and they were adapting it for the live action. And Zack Snyder kind of like took the adaptation thematically, but not super like I guess like the core values of the characters.
Yeah, he didn't give us the prototypical core values of the characters.
Didn't take with the audience. Whereas Marvel, like I have to compare it to Marvel here, because like with Marvel, they took the adaptation and they kind of put it in the background, because they tried to go as close to the comics as they could, and that's why they didn't have to go through this extra filter of sort like essentially gambling whether or not it would attract the audience, because they're using their source material to as a netting, as a safety net, because it's like like you don't have that extra risk of the adaptation catching the audience or not. Whereas in DC animated movies, there's no adaptation at all. It's 1-for-1 to the comics, right?
Yeah,
and they can just add and subtract carte blanche, essentially, like a la carte, right? Like they can take whatever theme they want to, whatever tone, whatever thesis, whatever like thing that they're trying to prove, and remove and add based on their storytelling, like appetite, right? Whereas in the movies, it's like they first have to go through this weird thing where they have to adapt it, right? Because they think it's just not made for. It's too fantastical. It's too hard to buy.
Right.
And I think that's kind of a failure in their part, because they didn't trust the audience to kind of buy that this could be real. They tried to like make it so that like these characters could exist in our world, whereas Marvel didn't care. Like they didn't care if we would buy that this is our world or not, right? Like they just went for the fantastical. Like they made Hawkeye superhuman where he shouldn't have been. But in DC, they kind of had to try. They wanted to make it more realistic. And kind of ask the question, how would it actually be in our world if these people existed? So yeah, that's kind of my long answer to it, which is like failure in adaptation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's kind of my whole thing.
Quick sidebar, Chris. How your comment about Hawkeye? How did they make him superhuman?
Well, because like, so if you look at his skill sets, he's an archer, and he does and he's a really good archer. But he'll do things like look away from Loki and shoot him in midair. Like that's something no human can do. And if this was a DC animated movie, DC like movie, they would have to justify that, because that's the thing that's the world that they sold to us, which is like, if Batman was real, he wouldn't be able to do half the shit he does in the comics. Whereas with Hawkeye, it's like Hawkeye shouldn't be able to do or take any of them really. Like what's a good one that's not Hawkeye?
Black Widow.
I was gonna take Black Widow. It's kind of obvious, but like Black Widow shouldn't be able to do half the shit that she does, but we can buy it because it's like, like that's how it is. Like I'm okay not accounting it for our real world physics, because you're showing me cool shit. Right?
Okay.
Like they kind of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's totally fair, dude. No, you make a good point. Kristina, I know you haven't seen a lot of the DC animated films, so you can't you just recently saw Red Son.
Well, yeah, I've seen some in the past as well.
Okay.
Like I've seen older ones, but I would say the issue here is more so it's just economics, right? So when you're trying to make these into live action movies, they're really trying to create a blockbuster. They're trying to make this a movie that everybody is going to want to go see and watch.
Yeah.
So whereas when they're doing the animated movies, they're like, we don't care if everybody comes to see and watch this. We just want our target audience of comic book people to come and watch this, right?
So you're saying that they can't manage their expectations, so they shoot for the moon? I'm
saying that they have to do things with the story. So it comes back to Chris's point around adaptation, right? So they have to do more like intros to the story, and that just makes it like more complicated. It changes the pace of the film.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like you have to dumb some things down. You can't just dive into it. You can't create the world you want to create. You have to make it something a mainstream audience will buy into.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's just a lot of things that you have to change when you do that. And I think DC DC wasn't really able to do that. And I think part of the problem too is the fact that they kept rebooting everything. So if you're gonna like keep rebooting it, the mainstream audience is gonna get tired of that. The mainstream audience doesn't care that there's another superhero,
And
another
confused.
Superman. Like, who cares? Like,
Well, I've actually got a theory about why DC isn't doing as well as it has in the live action film. I'd love to do an episode on that with you guys, because I think it has a lot to do with the fact that DC has a split fan base in the films, but not like the entirety of the people that are going to see DC films aren't necessarily DC comic fans. Like, I really truly believe
it's
that.
It's more of a mainstream audience. For
yes.
sure.
I think that there's part of
That's
it.
what they're trying to do, because they're taking huge risks with the amount of money that they're spending on these movies. So then they have to make sure that enough people are going to go see it, that risk pays off. Right?
But I also think that Marvel's kind of set this standard for superhero films, right? And then when you go in and you see Superman being all fucking brooding and gloomy, when you're used to Christopher Reeves, and then, you know, you take Batman and you put a gun in his hand, you know, it's not what they got when they watched Iron Man. It wasn't optimistic and hopeful, and, you know, it was kind of darker and more realistic, you know. When you know what, I really want to do an episode on this, so let's save it for then. But
okay,
but
yeah, because I don't think most people who go to see a DC movie are wanting a Marvel thing. I do think that it is a little bit of a different audience. I don't think it's exactly the same people, but
that's the thing, though. I really think that the people there's a large contingency of people that do go to see DC movies just because they're superhero films and they're expecting the same fucking thing. Like, I really do. And you know,
there's that audience.
I would say a Batman movie probably has more of an audience than any MCU movie. I think
Dark
there's
Knight,
even
yes.
more people.
Dark
like, Batman's just so cool that like everybody wants to go see a Batman movie. Like,
yeah. No, I think you raised a good point with the ubiquity of Batman, for sure. I think Batman is obviously, you know, and you know, he's iconic. I'm not going to say he's on the level of Superman, but he's almost there. Like, he's iconic.
I'm gonna say Batman is like the whole MCU put together. Like, that's just Batman. It's just, he's recognizable. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody thinks he's cool. And I think it's the fact that he is like kind of a gray character. He's not always good. He's not always bad. He's like, you don't really know what he's gonna do, kind of thing.
True.
Yeah.
And while we're speaking of Batman, I just want to say we lost Denny O'Neil this last week.
Oh yeah.
Rest in peace, Denny.
Legend.
Legend. And he's the guy that reinterpreted Batman and gave him a new voice and a new presence, and brought the gothic element of Batman to the page, and these stories with Ra's al Ghul and just, oh man. And what he did for Green Lantern and Green Arrow with Hard Traveling Heroes, man, I still look back at that now, especially in times like these with the civil unrest. I look back at those stories and just they're just as poignant now as they were when he wrote them in the 70s and the 80s. Like, they're just amazing. Rest in peace, Denny. So I think DC has had a pretty incredible success story with their animated content. And obviously I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they're part of Warner Brothers now too. You know, I think that had a lot to do with the fact that they even created this animated universe. You know, when you go to the company that gave birth to Bugs Bunny and literally cartoons, you know, from the beginning, you know, I think that's something that can kind of bleed into your company culture very quickly, and comic books just naturally translate into animation. So the other DC example I want to talk about is Young Justice and Titans. Yeah, so Young Justice, definitely one of my favorite DC IPs of all time. I love it. It's fantastic. It is so well written. The characters are so rich. The voice acting is fantastic. The stories are great. Yes, there are a couple of crappy episodes here and there, but it's more or less, it's mostly home runs. Okay.
You know what I love about Young Justice, before you continue?
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
It like really lives up to like the feel of Saturday morning cartoons, but it felt like if you were those people that watched it, it also grew with you because it was darker and like it's more mature. It really felt like it was marketed for us who used to watch like Teen Titans. Like this is feels very like Teen Titans grown up, right? Like it like I love that it accomplishes both, and I think like this is a great example of exactly what we're talking about in earlier this episode of these things kind of growing with the audience and becoming more
evolving with the
based
audience.
for
Yeah.
adults. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's great. No, I think you make a great point, Chris. You're right. Like you do feel like the show does evolve with you. And I think that has a lot to do with the time jumps that they do too. I don't know if you feel the same, but oh shit, we're going to spoil it for Kristina because Christina's planning on watching it. By the way, guys,
I'm planning on watching it.
Guys, by the way, we're definitely doing a Young Justice episode. That is happening.
Yeah, let's save it for that.
That is happening. That is happening. But you definitely get to see these characters evolve with you. Chris, you're 100% right. And again, the voice acting is fantastic. The fact that the Justice League is kind of peppered into it is great too. You get such a great mix of villains. Like dude,
I love that they're not shy about that either.
Yes.
Like in Teen Titans, like they would never ever show Batman. They even just alluded to him like maybe once. But here it's like it just feels like it's their like in Marvel Universe where like they can inject whatever character they want to because they can.
Yep.
It's like they're not shy about putting a lot of Batman in and a lot of like
So, because we're having this conversation about animation, I do want to point out, in my opinion, I think Young Justice is the best DC IP outside of comic books. I really do. In the last 20 years, I'm going to say that. Just shows, movies, everything. I think Young Justice is the best. I really do. Because it checks all the boxes. Like you don't get shortchanged on characters. Like it's not like they just keep you in this box of Young Justice. Like there's even villains like that you never thought you would see. It just delivers so much. It's so fucking rich. Yes, I was gonna say the main man. Like you get the main man. Like it pays off on so much. It pays off on so much. I love it. I don't
necessarily agree because there's so many out there for me to like.
What would you pick?
Like
what would you pick? Best
Batman
best,
Under the Red Hood.
Okay, so that 2-hour film, you think that's their best IP? Okay,
because the thing is like. Young Justice is good in general. But there are failings. There's a lot of failings in Young Justice.
You are a little bit obsessed with Jason Todd, though. But we have come on.
Yeah. Well, and the Robins, just the Robins family.
Yeah. The Robins. Yeah.
See, I don't even know. So Young Justice is really good because it's like it's this like really kind of deeper storytelling. Like back in the day, I really didn't like episodic based shows. And like the Young Justice is more long form than it is episodic. It is very episodic as well.
Yeah.
But like themes carry on. But I still don't think it could beat Justice League Unlimited for me. I think Justice League Unlimited is probably the gold standard for me. I don't know.
You know what? When you bring up,
I have to give that some thought.
Yeah, you know what? When you bring up Justice League Unlimited, like it's definitely a close tie for me. I love Justice League Unlimited.
And then there's also Green Lantern. Since we're on this topic,
yeah, Green Lantern animated series. Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah,
so good.
Yeah,
bring back Razor. Can we get more Razor, please?
Yeah, Razor's great. And Aya,
Lantern character ever.
And Aya too. I love Aya. Aya was great.
Aya was so dope.
Aya was great. Yeah. But I'm glad you're bringing this up because I was going to talk about the other kind of successes, beyond Young Justice. Like Green Lantern anime series was fantastic. It only lasted 2 seasons. It got canceled, but it was amazing, right? And definitely Justice League Unlimited, huge hit. Pretty much anything that Bruce Timm did was great, right? Mm-hmm. I wasn't a huge fan of the Batman animated series when I was a kid. I don't know why. I liked it. I really didn't.
Batman Beyond. Holy shit, Batman Beyond.
Is it good? Is it good?
Have you not seen it?
No, I haven't watched Batman Beyond.
It's also been canceled. I love it. It's like seeing old Bruce Wayne. Like, see if Luke was old Bruce Wayne from Batman Beyond,
mm-hmm.
like the Last Jedi would have been fucking dope. Like you see Bruce Wayne as like a broken, shitty old man that kind of is like, one of those old men that's like get off my porch sort of deal, and because he's so much smarter than everybody else, but he's also so fed up with the world that he can't save. And imagine him being the new Alfred to a new Batman who's a rebel and who's kind of like a criminal in his own right. Terry McGinnis, one of the best freaking Batmans ever. And the Batman suit is an Iron Man suit. It's like, it's dope. Like everything about Batman Beyond should be revived because it's the best thing.
Interesting.
Sorry,
No, it's okay. No, it's all good. So Chris, now that you brought up Justice League Unlimited, dude, I have to pick your brain a bit, man. Have to pick your brain. And Green Lantern animated. Favorite episode of Justice League Unlimited?
Oh, come on. That's so hard. Can I give you a few?
Yeah, give me three. Give me three. But like no crazy explanation. Just like
oh yeah. There's that episode when they went to the core. I think it's called the core. And Supergirl loses her power. And I really like that episode because she it really humbles her. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Like, there's that episode where they I don't know if it's Justice League Unlimited. I'm pretty sure it's Justice League Unlimited where they travel to the future and like Static Shock is there. And then
and Hawkman, like and Hawkman, and and Batman Beyond, right? Terry McGinnis is
Batman
there.
Beyond was there.
Yeah. Okay. And go ahead.
There's a lot I could say, but like the Android episode probably.
Oh, Amazo.
Where Lex Luthor, the Android, like Lex Luthor saves everybody in an act of like complete astonishment. Like he just, nobody could stop at the Android, and then him and Lex Luthor had this philosophical like fight, and then Lex Luthor could fuck the entire universe over, but he just chooses not to, and he just he just talks Android from destroying everything. I think that was one of the good episodes.
That's dope. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I would say for me it was a lot of episodes. It was
wait, sorry. Task Force X.
Yeah, that one was good.
Task Force X defeated the Justice League. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that one was definitely good. I would say my favorite was the Female Fight Club. That was definitely one of my favorites.
Oh, good.
I love that one.
I think Wonder Woman was kind of underpowered in that one. I think she should have kicked their ass way more.
Yeah, she should have kicked their ass way more.
And Shayera should have put up a better fight. I think she was also underpowered, but yeah.
Yeah, I like that one. And then I really liked the one with Question and Huntress. They were cool. I really like the Question. I like the Question a lot. Like I want
Huntress.
Yeah, Huntress is dope, but like the Question is so weird. Like he studies conspiracy theories, and he's just, I like that. I don't know. I like that about him. He's really dope like that. And then the other one was when Joker was setting those bombs up in Vegas. That was pretty gangster. I really like that one. And the girl, the one that could destroy the world, where Batman had to.
Oh shit!
Yeah, that was kind of awesome.
The Royal Flush Gang.
Yeah, the Royal Flush Gang. Yeah.
Oh, that was crazy.
Yeah,
and
Batman
that one was
just
good. Like talks her down.
Yeah,
that was so sad. What the heck?
Yeah, that was good. Oh, and the Flash Christmas episode. I love that one, dude. I always get all warm and fuzzy when I watch that episode. Love it, dude. It's so good. But yeah, no, guys, listen. Thanks for joining us. We're going to cut this one a little short. We're running over, but we still got a lot to talk about. I really want to dive into the Star Wars animated properties. I really want to talk about some of the what if stuff from Marvel that's coming up. And also, I want to pose a pretty crazy question about Marvel to Kristina and Chris and get their take on it, because honestly, I've been kind of thinking about this lately. So we'll come back. We'll definitely dive into that. We want to talk about a couple other things. Chris, I know you want to cover some things. What do you want to cover?
Yeah. I definitely like one of the main things I wanted to talk about was like comparing DreamWorks properties to Pixar properties. And also like I really want to dive deep into it. I don't know if this will be its own episode or not, but I really want to go into one of my favorite movie series ever, How to Train Your Dragon. And maybe some Toy Story in there because I love Toy Story.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm really excited for the Clone Wars as well.
Yeah, I want to dive into Clone Wars because I think Clone Wars, in my opinion, this is all I'm going to say on the subject right now, is the best Star Wars IP in the last 15, 20 years. So that's my take.
More than Rebels, right?
It's tight. It's fucking tight, dude.
Yeah. It's Clone Wars all the way.
Yeah, because for different reasons, like I get more Jedi, Sith, and Rebels. I don't know. Actually, I get more Jedi. I get more mysticism in Rebels than I did in Clone Wars overall. But I do love each of them for their own reasons. But yeah, Kristina,
did you have something to add?
Yeah, my favorite animated superheroes are The Incredibles, so I would love to get into that more. So.
I have some theories on that. I have some theories on The Incredibles that will tie us back to comic books and Marvel, because I see Brad Bird's work with The Incredibles as the perfect model for something in the Marvel universe that has been woefully underrealized. And I really want to talk about that. So we'll definitely get into that. But we're going to sign off here. Yeah, lots to talk about, dude. Lots to talk about.
Yes, so we're going to sign off here in a second. But before you go, I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for their support and their listens, spending your time with us. If you could take a moment and review us, it's important for us to find the reach. So if you could do that, we would really appreciate it. You can review us on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, and Stitcher. And also follow us on Instagram.
Before we sign off, I just want to say thank you to all the listeners out there. You guys may not know this, but this has been our most successful week with the podcast thus far. And we have you guys to thank for it. We owe it all to you guys. You guys are the ones that are out there listening. You guys are the ones that are out there sharing our show with your friends. You guys are the ones that are posting reviews for us. And you guys are the ones that we're doing this for. We're so happy that you guys are enjoying the content that we're producing. We would love to get you guys more involved in that process. Like Chris said, drop us a review. Let us know how you feel about the show. And any feedback is incredible because it helps us make the show better for you. So we're going to say goodbye here. Thank you so much for joining us. Your co-hosts have been Frank McGuire,
Kristina Dudumas,
Chris Sabana,
and our producer is Beatrice Ledesma. Thanks, Beatrice.
Thanks, Beatrice.
Thank you.
Peace.